Somewhere beneath the waves, perhaps lost to the passage of time, lies one of humanity's most enduring mysteries, Atlantis, a city said to have risen in glory and vanished in a single night. But what if Atlantis is not just a myth told by ancient philosophers, but a forgotten truth buried under centuries of ocean and silence? The story begins with a single man, Plato. Around 360 BC, he wrote of a mighty civilization that existed 9,000 years before his time, a land beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. According to his words, Atlantis was a powerful island nation, rich in knowledge, wealth, and architecture far beyond its era. Its people were said to be ambitious, wise, and strong until their greed and moral decay brought about their downfall, swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. 4 centuries, scholars debated. Was Plato recounting history, or was he crafting an allegory, a moral story about the corruption of human nature? After all, no other ancient writer mentions Atlantis. Some historians see it as Plato's metaphor for the dangers of arrogance and imperialism. Others, however, believe he was describing something real, perhaps a civilization whose memories survived only as fragments in the myths of different cultures. The question then becomes, if Atlantis did exist, where was it? Many theories emerged, each trying to anchor myth to reality. Some point to the island of Santorini, once home to the Minoan civilization, which was indeed destroyed by a volcanic eruption around 1600 BC. The catastrophe sent tsunamis across the Aegean and wiped out entire cities. A real event that could easily have inspired Plato's tale. Others suggest that Atlantis was not in the Mediterranean at all, but in the Atlantic Ocean, perhaps near the Azores. Satellite images have shown strange formations on the ocean floor, though many turned out to be natural or errors in mapping. Still, the idea of a sunken continent remains irresistible. There are also those who think Atlantis was never an island, but a memory, a symbolic echo of a global flood that reshaped early human civilization. Geological evidence shows that around 11,600 years ago, exactly the time Plato mentions, the last ice age ended, melting glaciers and flooding coastlines worldwide. Massive areas of land were lost beneath rising seas. Could the story of Atlantis be a memory passed down from survivors of that global catastrophe? Ancient flood myths appear across dozens of cultures: Mesopotamia, India, the Americas. It's as if humanity itself remembers losing something vast, something we can no longer name. Yet beyond the geological and historical theories lies another question, one less about geography and more about ourselves. Why does the myth of Atlantis endure so powerfully in our collective imagination? Perhaps it's because Atlantis represents something timeless, the dream of a perfect civilization, advanced and enlightened, yet doomed by its own hubris. It mirrors our own fears, that humanity, in its pursuit of progress, might one day cause its own destruction. We look at Atlantis not as a tale of the past, but as a warning about the future. Even scientists who reject the literal existence of Atlantis acknowledge its strange persistence. New evidence continues to emerge from the sea. Sunken cities off the coasts of Japan, India, and Egypt, places once thought mythic, now proven real. Each discovery blurs the line between legend and history. The city of Heraklion, for example, was believed to be only a story until it was found submerged off the coast of Egypt in 2000. Could Atlantis one day be found the same way? Some oceanographers believe it's possible. The ocean covers more than 70% of Earth's surface, yet over 80% remains unexplored. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about our own seafloor. There could be entire worlds hidden beneath us, civilizations erased by time and water. Still, others argue that Atlantis is not a place to be found, but a question to be understood. It invites us to look at the fragility of our own world. Our cities, our technologies, our oceans. What if we too are building our own Atlantis, blind to the warning buried in its myth. The allure of Atlantis is that it sits on the edge of what is real and what is imagined. Every diver, every explorer who descends into the dark ocean depths carries with them a whisper of hope that somewhere, under layers of sediment and coral, lies proof that legends are not lies, but memories. And if we ever find it, what would we see? Would we uncover a civilization far more advanced than we believed ancient humans could build? Or would we find ruins no different from any other? Just stones shaped by time, given power only by our longing for mystery? The truth may never surface, yet maybe Atlantis was never meant to be found. Maybe it was meant to make us search. Not the ocean, but ourselves. Because in a way, Atlantis is a reflection of humanity itself, capable of greatness, yet always on the brink of losing it all. We build, we rise, and sometimes we fall. Every empire leaves behind its ruins, and every ruin leaves behind a question. Not where was Atlantis, but what have we done with ours? The sea keeps its secrets well. And perhaps that's the point, that some truths are not buried to be found, but to remind us that not everything humanity loses is gone forever. Some of it lingers, deep within the current of memory, waiting for the day when we finally listen to what the silence of the ocean has been trying to tell us all along. Imagine touching a glass surface and leaving behind a tiny trace, a fingerprint invisible to the naked eye, yet carrying your personal signature, one that no other human being on Earth can replicate. A fingerprint may seem simple, just a set of curved lines at the tips of our fingers, but behind it lies a biological secret that has puzzled scientists for centuries. Why can no two people have the same fingerprint? More than 100 years ago, scientists realized that fingerprints are not random patterns, but rather an incredibly precise system designed to make every human being unique. But what's the scientific reason behind this uniqueness? And why don't even identical twins who share the exact same DNA have identical fingerprints? Let's start at the beginning. When a fetus is developing in the womb, specifically between the 6th and 13th week of pregnancy, the skin layers begin to form. At that stage, the fingerprints start taking shape at the fingertips as a result of a complex interaction between genetic factors and the environment inside the womb. Genes provide the general blueprint for the shape of the hand and fingers, but they don't define the fine details of the fingerprint. Those tiny details, the small ridges, bifurcations, loops, and arches, are influenced by unpredictable factors such as the pressure of the amniotic fluid, the position of the fetus, temperature variations, and even tiny vibrations from the heartbeat nearby at that moment. In other words, a fingerprint isn't purely genetic. It's the product of microscopic environmental conditions that occur once in a lifetime, making its exact repetition impossible. But could it ever happen, even theoretically, that two identical fingerprints appear somewhere in the universe? In biometric statistics, this probability has been studied in depth. Scientists estimate that the chance of two fingerprints being exactly the same is about 1 in 64 billion, and some estimates push that number to astronomical levels, far beyond the total number of humans who have ever lived. In short, from a scientific standpoint, perfect fingerprint duplication is practically impossible. But why did scientists choose fingerprints as the main tool for identification? The answer is simple and fascinating. Fingerprints never change throughout a person's life. From the moment they form in the womb until long after death, your fingerprint remains the same, unless the skin is deeply damaged. Even if the outer layer of skin is injured or removed, it grows back with the exact same pattern because that original design is embedded in the deeper layers of the skin. That's why fingerprints have been used in criminal investigations for more than a century. They are reliable, unique, and permanent. Now let's pause for a moment and ask, if fingerprints are unique, Does the same apply to other parts of the body? The answer is, to some extent, yes. The human eye, for instance, has an iris pattern that's unique to each person, as do the veins beneath the skin, the human voice, and even the arrangement of teeth. But while all these features differ from person to person, fingerprints remain the most stable and the easiest to detect, making them the ultimate signature of identity. Identical twins present the most curious case. They share 100% of their DNA, yet their fingerprints differ completely. The reason is that fingerprint formation depends on tiny random variations inside the womb. A small change in hand position or a slight difference in the pressure on the finger can completely alter the ridge patterns. Even if the genetic code is the same, the outcome is different, much like drawing the same shape multiple times, but never producing an exact copy in every detail. Some studies have tried to understand this phenomenon more deeply. One modern theory suggests that a fingerprint is the result of organized chaos, a system that emerges from complex interactions between cell growth, skin tension, and micropressure variations during development. This system is so sensitive that even the tiniest fluctuation in timing or movement can create an entirely new pattern. It's similar to the butterfly effect in chaos theory, where the flap of a butterfly's wings in one place could alter the course of a storm elsewhere. A fingerprint is born from that same kind of delicate chaos, a moment where countless tiny interactions merge to create a one-of-a-kind pattern. But with all this complexity, what's the biological purpose of fingerprints? From a functional standpoint, we don't know with absolute certainty, but there are intriguing hypotheses. Some researchers believe that the ridges on our fingertips help increase friction with surfaces, improving our grip, especially in humid or slippery conditions. Others suggest that the ridges enhance tactile sensitivity, allowing us to detect textures and vibrations more effectively. So fingerprints aren't just a mark of identity, they serve a practical, biological purpose. In the end, we can say that a fingerprint is a record of a single moment in life, a moment that will never happen again because every condition that created it was completely unique. Perhaps that's what makes it more than just lines on the skin. It's a symbol of individuality in a world of billions. And every time you place your finger on a glass surface or a fingerprint sensor, remember, what you're leaving behind isn't just a physical trace. It's a timeless signature, unlike any other that has ever existed since the dawn of humanity. We live in a time where pain is no longer the greatest enemy, but emptiness. That emptiness that we try to fill with anything that gives us a quick sense of pleasure. A phone, a short video, a game, food, music, or even thoughts we repeat unconsciously. At first, it seems innocent, just a small pleasure, a momentary escape from pressure, a short break from reality. But the question we rarely ask is, why do we lose the ability to enjoy after a while? And why does pleasure itself turn into a burden we need just to feel normal? Addiction does not start as a danger, but as a solution for stress, loneliness, boredom, or the feeling of meaninglessness. And here lies its true danger. The brain does not differentiate much between what saves you and what destroys you. It simply learns. When it finds something that gives it quick relief, it starts to associate it with survival, repeats it, then requests it, then depends on it. Over time, pleasure is no longer pleasure. It becomes a necessity just to avoid feeling bad. Neuroscience research indicates that the brain operates on a reward system where chemicals related to pleasure and motivation are released. The problem is not in the release itself, but in repeated, intense stimulation. When the brain receives easy and frequent rewards, it begins to lower its sensitivity. The result? The same thing that once gave you great happiness becomes ordinary, then weak, then insufficient. You demand more. Not because you want pleasure, but because you have lost the ability to feel it without that thing. And here comes the puzzling question. Is addiction a search for pleasure or an escape from pain? Many psychological studies lean toward the second answer. The addict does not seek to feel good as much as to avoid feeling bad. Addiction transforms from a desire into a compulsion, from a choice into a habit, from pleasure into a trap that makes a person repeat the same behavior, knowing it no longer gives what it once did. There is a theory known as the neural adaptation theory, which states that the brain adapts to any level of stimulation, no matter how strong. This means that fast, repeated happiness loses its value. This is why many people today feel numb, constantly bored, and as if nothing excites them like before. Not because the world has become less pleasurable, but because our brains are exhausted from excess. But the most important question, is addiction a lack of willpower? The clear scientific answer, no. Addiction is not a moral failure, but an acquired pattern. It is the result of interaction between the brain, the environment, and personal experience. When we reduce addiction to the idea of a weak person, we ignore the fact that any human, under certain circumstances, can fall into this trap. The difference is only in type, not in essence. What do we actually lose because of addiction? We lose sensitivity. We lose the ability to enjoy simple things. We lose patience. We lose the natural progression of pleasure. Everything becomes slow, boring, tasteless if it is not fast and intense. And here lies the painful paradox. The more we chase pleasure, the farther it moves away from us. Escaping the trap of addiction does not start with forceful prohibition, but with understanding. Understanding how the brain works, why we resort to this behavior, and what we are trying to compensate for. Some research suggests that reducing stimulation, not increasing it, is what restores the brain's balance. Silence, slowness, waiting, and even boredom are not enemies, but tools to regain sensation. In the end, addiction is not the story of people who lost control, but the story of humans who tried to feel something, only to end up unable to feel anything without a mediator. And the question that remains suspended is, do we have the courage to endure a little emptiness in order to regain our ability to experience true pleasure? Have you ever been sitting calmly and suddenly someone starts eating next to you? The sound of a chewing, food breaking, or even light drinking sounds. And within seconds, you feel an unexplained annoyance, tension, maybe even inner anger. What's strange is that you might like this person, yet the sound alone is enough to change your mood. Why does this happen? This annoyance is not being spoiled, nor is it weak nerves. It is a real phenomenon studied by research called misophonia. It is a condition in which the brain becomes overly sensitive to certain sounds, especially close human sounds such as eating or breathing. Here, the brain does not treat the sound as normal information, but as a threat. Neuroscientific studies indicate that the problem is not in the ear, but in how the brain processes sound. When hearing chewing sounds, a part of the brain linked to emotions and rapid reactions becomes active, as if the body is preparing to defend itself. That is why the annoyance comes suddenly and strongly, without time to think or calm down. But why eating sounds specifically? One theory suggests that these sounds are too intimate. They are sounds we usually hear from ourselves, not from others. And when someone intrudes into this private auditory space, the brain feels discomfort, as if its boundaries have been violated. Another theory sees that the brain links these sounds to previous unpleasant situations, even if we do not clearly remember them. Over time, the sound itself becomes a button that directly presses on feelings of tension without passing through logical thinking. The important question is, can this annoyance be controlled? Research says yes. Partially, awareness of the issue reduces its intensity, and using light background sounds or changing the seating position helps the brain not focus on the disturbing sound. The idea is not to silence the world, but to retrain the brain. In the end, your annoyance at eating sounds does not mean you are a bad person or overly sensitive. It means your brain is exaggerating protection. And perhaps the deeper question is not, why do we hate this sound? But how many sounds in our lives annoy us simply because our minds have learned to fear them? People thought this penguin was brave, but scientists said something completely different. In 2007, while filming a documentary in Antarctica, a strange scene was captured. A group of penguins walking toward the sea, and suddenly one penguin breaks away, turns around, and starts walking alone in the opposite direction, toward the icy mountains. It doesn't stop, it doesn't look back, it just walks steadily. This scene has returned strongly today and become a trend, but the real question is, why did it affect people so deeply? From a scientific perspective, this behavior is abnormal. Penguins depend on the group for survival, food, protection, and even orientation. Researchers explain this behavior as either a navigational malfunction, a neurological disorder, or an illness that causes the individual to lose the ability to make the correct decision. Simply put, this penguin chose a path that does not lead to survival without realizing it. But why didn't the video pass unnoticed? And why did it resurface and spread after so many years? Because people didn't just see a penguin, they saw themselves, a person who appears calm on the outside, but internally is lost or exhausted, and so drifts away from the group, not because they want to be different, but because they are no longer able to keep going with it. Here, an important question emerges. Is every departure from the path an act of courage? Psychology distinguishes between conscious individuality and withdrawal caused by exhaustion and loss of direction. Not every solitary path is the right one, and sometimes calmness in a decision hides a danger greater than hesitation. What is striking is that the penguin does not appear afraid or confused, and that is what makes the scene unsettling, because it reminds us that a human being may walk steadily toward a wrong choice simply because they never stop to ask themselves, does this path really lead me to what I need? This video does not give a ready-made answer, but it asks a direct question. When is walking alone a strength, and when is it a sign that we need to stop and rethink? Perhaps that is why this short scene turned into a mirror. Everyone sees something different in it, but everyone feels the weight of the same question. Success is not a sudden explosion in your life. It is not a magical moment where you wake up different, and it is not a powerful wave of motivation that appears out of nowhere and changes everything. These are just illusions we like to believe because they are comfortable. The truth is less exciting, but far more powerful. Success is often boring. It is waking up at the same time every day, doing the same small actions, repeating, then repeating, then repeating again. No applause, no instant results, just quiet steps that almost no one notices. The brain does not change through big decisions, but through small habits. Research suggests that every repeated behavior builds a stronger neural pathway, as if you are carving a road through a forest. At first, walking is difficult, but after days, the path becomes easier. After weeks, you walk without thinking. This is routine, and this is the secret. The problem is that we trust motivation too much. We wait to feel like it before we start. But motivation is temporary. It fades quickly. Habits, on the other hand, remain even when you feel nothing. That's why successful people are not more motivated than you. They are simply less negotiable with themselves. They do what must be done even when they don't want to. So maybe the question is not, how do I achieve massive success? But rather, what is the small action I can repeat every single day without excuses? Because your future is not built in big moments. It is built in the small things you do when no one is watching. Imagine you left the house feeling completely normal, and then suddenly you start noticing something very small, almost invisible, yet it steals your entire focus. Your shirt sleeve is 1 centimeter longer than your jacket sleeve. The fabric at your waist rises slightly every time you walk. An inner layer twists and bunches up for no clear reason. No one notices, but you do. And you feel a real irritation, bigger than it should be. Why? Why can a tiny detail in your clothes occupy you more than an important conversation, a lesson, or even a happy moment? Are we too sensitive, or is there a deeper explanation? Irritation from mismatched clothing is not just being picky or exaggerating. In psychology, part of this feeling is known as sensory sensitivity, which is a natural difference between people in how they receive bodily signals. Some people can ignore the friction of fabric completely, while others feel every texture, every pull, every slight shift. The nervous system does not process signals at the same intensity for everyone. Imagine there is an internal volume amplifier for the senses. In some of us, it is set a little higher, making normal sensations feel more irritating, but the matter does not stop there. There is another important concept in neuroscience called sensory prediction. Your brain does not simply wait for sensation and then interpret it. It predicts it in advance. When you wear a jacket, your brain expects the layers to be stable, aligned, and equal in length and shape. If reality contradicts this expectation, even slightly, an internal tension arises. It is the gap between what you expected and what actually happened. That gap creates the irritation. It is as if your brain is saying, "There is an error, fix it." You may ask, why do I feel like I cannot ignore it? Here comes the role of attention and focus. Studies in cognitive science suggest that attention works like a spotlight. When it shines on something, that thing grows in our awareness. At first, the sensation may be mild, but once you notice it, your brain starts monitoring it constantly. And the more you monitor it, the stronger it becomes. It is a feedback loop. Attention to stronger sensation to more attention. There is also a side related to our love for order and symmetry. The human brain naturally prefers balanced patterns. We feel comfortable with symmetry, straight lines, and equilibrium. When sleeves are uneven or layers are unstable, a visual and tactile break in that symmetry occurs. Even if it is very small, it awakens an immediate desire in us to restore balance. This does not mean you have a psychological disorder. It simply means your brain is wired to seek consistency. An important question, is this irritation normal or does it indicate something deeper? The answer, in most cases, it is completely normal. But if the irritation is so intense that it disrupts your day or makes you adjust your clothes dozens of times, it may be linked to a high level of sensory sensitivity or perfectionist tendencies. Perfectionism is not always related to achievement. Sometimes it appears in very small details, like organizing a desk or aligning sleeves. There is another interesting explanation, interoceptive awareness. Some people have a very high awareness of their bodily signals. They feel their heartbeat, the movement of their clothes, and subtle changes in posture. This awareness can be an advantage, for example, in sports or the arts, but it can also make small frictions more irritating than usual. But why does it feel worse when we are stressed? Because stress increases the alertness of the nervous system. When you are anxious, your brain enters a heightened monitoring state. Everything becomes clearer, louder, stronger. So uneven sleeves might not bother you on a calm day, but they may irritate you greatly on a day full of pressure. Now let us ask a practical question. How can this irritation be managed? First, understanding alone reduces half the problem. When you realize that what is happening is a natural neurological reaction, the sense of strangeness or self-blame decreases. Second, try consciously redirecting your attention. Instead of trying to suppress the sensation, acknowledge it and then shift your focus to another activity. Third, choose fabrics and layers that suit you. Some materials create more friction than others, and some cuts are more stable. Experimentation matters here. There is also a simple exercise. When you feel irritated, take a deep breath and focus on the sensation of your feet touching the ground. This redistributes your attention from a very narrow point, the sleeve or the waist, to a broader bodily sensation. Over time, your brain learns that this feeling is not a threat and does not require constant monitoring. From a simple philosophical angle, perhaps this small irritation reminds us of something bigger. We do not live only in our thoughts, but in our bodies as well. Tiny details in fabric can affect our mood, focus, and even our decisions. The body is not merely a container for the mind, but a constant partner in experience. In the end, the question is not, why am I irritated by uneven sleeves? Rather, what does this irritation reveal about how my brain works, about my sensitivity, about my need for order? When we understand the mechanism, irritation transforms from a mysterious enemy into a phenomenon that can be managed. And perhaps next time you feel your jacket sliding down while the layer beneath rises up, you will smile a little because you know your brain is simply trying to create balance in a world full of small details. And here is your challenge. The next time this happens, do not adjust your clothes immediately. Wait 10 seconds. Observe the sensation. Ask yourself, is it truly unbearable, or am I just used to perfection? You may discover that the irritation fades when you stop giving it so much spotlight. And you may discover something deeper about yourself, about your relationship with order, control, and the subtle sensation that makes you, you.